Hello, Beth and Marlene, with help from Caroline. I'm Joey.
I'm Matt.
I'm Kristen.
This is Messing with the Master, a podcast where three lifelong Tori Amos fans reflect on the iconic singer-songwriter's catalog by thoughtfully and intentionally reorganizing each album into fresh playlists that explore Tori's musical legacy as well as our own interconnected personal narratives and friendship, which began with a shared passion for Tori's music over 20 years ago. On this week's episode, we're going to free ourselves from your aggression. We're going to heal ourselves from your religion as we dive into 2014's Unrepentant Geraldines, a record that Tori referred to as her, quote, secret sonic selfie. Amidst of putting up her musical The Light Princess at London's National Theatre, Tori found herself sneaking in some private writing sessions for the songs that would go on to comprise Geraldines. It's an album marked by extreme intimacy, a sense of pensiveness and quietude even when there's a groove. That intimacy also comes through in the homegrown nature and sound of the record, with Tori and her sound engineer husband, Mark, performing all manners of instrumentation and programming from their Cornwall studio. Tori's daughter Tash is the sole additional vocalist. Conceptually, the album mostly tackles and confronts aging and mortality head-on. Tori turned 50 while recording the album. But of course, it wouldn't be a Tori Amos record without some patriarchal ass-whooping, so there's plenty of that to go around. In keeping with the intimacy of the record, Geraldines also spawned perhaps Tori's most beloved latter career world tour, 80 nights of just Tori and her keyboards and the occasional synth drum sample, where she reimagined beloved songs, showcased the best of her most recent output, and most excitingly, did an absolutely dizzying amount of new covers and mashups, including, well, we'll get there. So join us as we drop another verbal bomb. This is Messing with the Master, Unrepentant Geraldines.
Good evening.
Hi.
I really like this record, and I had a lot of fun listening and messing. Yeah.
Same here. I like it a lot because this is where sort of like we get to actually do a lot of our listening together, which we'll get to in a little bit. But having those fun moments of going on tour or listening to a record with your friend who's really into the same thing at the same time is always really fun. So we get to do that with this era. This era is really fun. Yeah,
I have good memories and warm feelings towards this era, for sure.
Same here. I tried on the shirt that I was wearing in my 2014 picture with Tori just a few minutes ago. I thought it would be fun to wear it, but I don't know. I think it's shrunk a little bit.
A little tight, yeah.
It's a little tight. Mm-hmm. It's okay. It's a Marc Jacobs shirt, and I wore a Marc Jacobs shirt when I was working with Mary Clayton, and Mary Clayton pulled me aside, and after she ordered an order of orange chicken and a large soy latte from Starbucks that she made the president of a awards strategy company go out and get for her, and she folded me very close to her, and she smelled like roses, and she said, "Baby, before you wear that shirt again, you need to lose about 5 pounds." So if in 2014 that was how it was, tonight it wasn't going to happen.
Dude, for inflation, that's like 10 pounds. That's fucked up.
Maddie, am I remembering correctly that maybe she just had a similar order, but I remember you telling me this, and then I interviewed her, and she offered me some of that chicken.
That was
I
the
think
chicken.
it was the same. It was the same chicken, and you were like, "She offered you some." She told me I had to lose 5 pounds.
Yeah.
It was the same day. I remember.
I
interviewed her right
Mary
after
Clayton,
that.
the brilliant genius backup singer. She was on Rolling Stone's "Gimme Shelter" as the iconic female voice on that song in the film 20 Feet from Stardom, which I worked with her, and of course, the background vocals on "Cornflake Girl." So
the man with the golden gun. Miss
it
Mary.
makes sense. But I don't want to go too far down the, Marc Jacobs shirts fitting too tight rabbit hole tonight, because we have big news that actually is very relevant to this episode. Kristen, would you like to take it and let everybody know what we're talking about?
Are we talking about the earth-shattering news from this week? The
What else?
Dixie
What else?
EP? I mean, other things happened this week. I don't know if anybody's been watching the news, but top of the list for me was the Dixie EP dropping.
Top of my feed, yeah.
Top of my feed was the Dixie feed dropping. Zero context for why the songs were chosen. Now, we, as Messing with the Master, experts, can talk about why we think the songs were chosen. We'll go there. But yeah, we had this EP drop. We didn't have the other songs drop. The EP was a related set of songs. It's been a very confusing week.
It felt very inspired by Messing with the Master. And then when you look at Apple Music, there are lots of very MWTM influenced, I think, playlists.
Yeah, there's a moment happening, and I think we are directly influencing that. Yeah. And what Kristen's referring to, of course, is that there was a Dixie EP. Dixie, of course, being a B-side / bonus track from Unrepentant Geraldines. Well, I know, but just in case there's anybody random who's just coming across this.
We don't want them to think we're thinking of some racist Southern anthem.
Oh,
this
right.
is a Tori Amos song.
When Kristen says the other songs weren't there, she means the other bonus songs, Forest of Glass, and My Telephone to God.
Yes.
So
I think we all kind of anticipated that would be I was thinking, vinyl re-release, which we got, and we would get the songs. I assume they'd all come together, but as we all know, we got a Dixie EP with Promise, Bang, Reindeer King.
And I get releasing Dixie because
Ocean
it's
Ocean.
Ocean to Ocean. You're going to get the rest of those bonus songs when they re-release it. It's going to be, they also found out today, it's they're slowly dribbling out information. So there's 3 different vinyl, paint splatters, depending where you are in the world. And people are pre-ordering those. And the remastered version, including the bonus tracks, will be available on Spotify, on iTunes, all of that, which is great, in September, I guess. But on top of it, we found out today that it will be remixed to be in Dolby Atmos, which is interesting, but makes sense given how we'll get there. I alluded to it in my intro, and also we've discussed it quite a bit with Native Invader, but it makes sense that she would be able to more readily mix the record for the re-release, because Geraldines was the first record that, I use the term homegrown, but really it's her and Mark. Every instrument, every piece of programming, everything that has been played is just the two of them, which probably says something about the amount of tracks that are being used. I don't know much about music, so I don't want to misspeak, but I think there's probably something there about, there's probably different versions of the songs, and probably she has more access to more readily mix it in that way, which is kind of exciting. So I wonder what we'll hear that we don't hear on Geraldines right now, which is an interesting prospect given that it's a pretty musically sparse record, and I feel like your ears can pick up every note and breath and kazoo. So it's I think that I'll be interested to hear what we hear. Even the Dixie full quality. Did you notice? Because I'm sure we've all listened a bunch of times. There's a really interesting sound at the beginning. I don't know if it's an amp turning on or a pedal, but it's a very sustained noise that I can't quite identify, that I never would have picked up from a low quality version of it that I've had for 10 years on my computer. So I'm already excited by the prospect. The piano sounds so loud and full and clear and beautiful, and so I'm excited to hear what actually comes of a remastered, in a sense remixed version of the album.
And are we going to go on record as saying that the tracks that are included with the Dixie EP that are not Dixie, the additional tracks, are not remastered, remixed, or mixed in any other way. I just want to put that out there. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page because I thought
Ocean to Ocean is Ocean to Ocean is so recent. Promise doesn't sound any different to me, but Matthew is asking because and Bang is the big clue there because Bang, as I think we discussed briefly, it was the last song that she recorded for Invader, and as a result, Bang has a similar quality to some of the later recorded Beekeeper songs that have a bit of a muffled quality to the piano, like it's not been fully mastered. So Bang sounds exactly the same to me, which means that it tells me that Native Invader songs have not been remastered yet. Matthew was convinced that Reindeer King sounded crisper, deeper, and maybe that's true, but
it felt like
know.
the low notes were maybe a little bit more powerful or had a little bit more bass to them. They felt a little bit more pronounced. Yeah. I don't know. I'm looking for any reason to talk about Reindeer King, really, but I guess the other part of it is like, why wouldn't the remastered Promise be on there? Right?
Yeah.
Just a question.
Maybe we should all re-listen to Promise again and just. I don't know.
Well, we will. We did, and we will. But so I've spent some time re-listening to these songs. I don't think they were remastered, and I don't. It's possible they were, right? But like I did what I did when Scarlet's Walk came out, which is like I'm looking at each moment that I find like very unique, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm not finding it. But who knows? I think. There's been a lot of conversation online, like how are the songs related? Are they not related? I think that they're, as we've discussed on this podcast, there's so much content about like mothering, Mother Earth, like the mother, that I absolutely see how the songs are related. But like the context and why is missing. So yes, of course I can see a connection to any songs. Just the why would be nice to have, but that's okay. But I don't think they were remastered. And if anybody feels differently, definitely let us know what you hear. Let us know. But I don't think so.
Yeah. I can make the argument for why they're together, but it also just feels like a bit of like a reintroduce yourself to Tori Amos kind of like track listing with like no classic songs and just a few newer songs. I mean, I'm going to venture to say, Matt, you might disagree, but I almost feel like the way it was put together, I don't feel like anybody from her team put it together. I feel like it might have just been a thing that was done. Like, oh, okay, you have this one song that you want out there. Let's pull some other tracks together so it gets maybe more visibility, or, you know what I mean? Like, or maybe people find it differently.
Yeah, I don't know what all the the nuts and bolts and the algorithms are all about. I don't know if it's advantageous for any artist to have multiple track EPs or just put out a single. I'm not really in that world. I wonder if that's part of the thinking. It would be great to know a little bit more, though. In any case, just a little bit.
Drop us a line, John Witherspoon, if you want to talk to us about.
If only we knew someone who could directly ask someone else about it. But anyway.
But listen, there was some sort of. I agree that there's some sort of distance for sure, but there's also some sort of connection, because to me the Promise and Dixie together makes sense in a lot of ways, and so they're obviously like. Something's happened. I need some comms, y'all. I'm in marketing. Give me some high-level comms. Who chose it? Why'd they choose it? I mean, I know I can read between the lines, but as a fan, I want more,
Yeah. I just hope it wasn't like an AI-generated mixing that happened, Which, who knows? Who knows, right?
Who knows? In 2024, anything goes, honestly.
Anything goes, anything is possible.
This week, after the Dixie EP drop, anything can happen.
But Correct. It does put Unrepentant Geraldines sort of back on our minds. It's been on our minds for the last couple of weeks anyway, because we knew this was coming. But this is just like really very convenient timing for us. Oh, look, it's Larry. Everybody say hi to Larry. Formerly Hot Dog Larry, now retired.
He's still working it.
He's still working.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
He's got a pull his load around the house, pull his weight.
Anyway.
So this is a fun one because much like, we haven't gotten to Night of Hunters yet. We're getting there, but this is another record in which I think of Night of Hunters and I think of Geraldines as really formative in our friendship, both mine and Matt's, but also, the three of us. Kristen had already fled New York City by then, but we obviously came together on tour and such. But I have such affection for that period because it was a time when, believe it or not, it was still incredibly difficult to hear anything in advance. Actually, it felt like there was a doubling down where it became quite difficult to hear any music in advance if you were not directly in the industry. So, Joey couldn't just it wasn't 2007 where I could just shoot an email and get a copy of the record. It was very different. And Matthew, because he had been working prolifically as a journalist for Pop Matters, and I've been interviewing Tori and was, on call to get those experiences. I feel fortunate. It's safe to say now, all these years later, that I got to join you. I was invited to exclusive listening parties of two to listen to the record.
We were working together. I mean, we worked together. We worked together a lot.
Yeah. Well, we did work together on the Spotlight. Yeah.
The Spotlight, and I believe you edited this interview that I did in 2014 as well. I mean,
that's correct.
You definitely gave me editing help with that, and
that's
always.
Right. That's right.
So
and I
you were pulling your weight. It's
You're right.
not like not like I gave some rando on the street a sneak peek of Unrepentant Geraldines.
No, but
it was necessary.
Yes, and I did eventually write a review of it as well. Sort of a take two review. That's a controversial story for another time, but or maybe for the bonus someday. Yes. But I say that to mean that I felt very grateful and very privileged to have that listening experience with you. And the thing that's kind of crazy about this, and Maddie, I could be misremembering, but based on my remember of the timeline, for some reason, you had access to this album like months in advance, like way, way, way more in advance than is usual. It was very strange.
I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was pretty far in advance, and I remember being surprised that they were going to let me hear it.
But you had it months in advance, and I remember that very, very distinctly, because I remember being like, how did you get it? How did you get to listen to it so early? And why were you listening to it so early? And there was something about it that when I even eventually got my own advance copy about a month early in order to write the review, they were being very, very cagey and holding on to like the liner notes and stuff. They didn't want to give lyrics, and they didn't want to give the personnel information. And when I finally got somebody from PR to give it to me, I was like, oh, is there a mistake here? Because everything says Bosendorfer keyboards, vocals, organ, Tori Amos, guitar, programming, Mac-Aladdin. Yeah, like every single one. I was like, what's going on? So I wonder if there was there was discussion about how to like discuss, or maybe not discuss at all, that sort of like extremely intimate creation of the record, right? There was something going on with like the way they were going to put it out into the world and market it maybe, or talk about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we had our advanced listen, there were no lyrics, and I don't think there was art or notes or anything like that at that point. No. And I remember taking notes by hand while we were listening, just with questions about, I wonder what this is, and I wonder who played this. I can't wait to see the liner notes. But
right.
I guess, I don't know, listening to it that way is an interesting experience, because then you're I don't know. I'm a person who doesn't watch trailers a lot before he sees the movie. I don't like to read a lot about a movie before I go see it. So not having those materials as I'm actually listening to it, I actually like that. It frees me from being distracted by stuff.
Yeah.
Forces me to focus a little bit. But It was definitely a memorable listening experience for sure. Mostly because of your dog Bridget Fonda. Rest in peace. We love
baby.
Bridget Fonda.
Bridget.
Gangly, really chaotic, but so sweet. And I'll post a picture of Bridget Fonda with Joey's permission later, hopefully.
Yeah, he has a picture from the day that he came to my house.
Yeah.
To play the record for me, and she is in a provocative pose. Let's put it that way.
It's really, really slutty, but it was like, but very innocent at the same. It's a weird thing. Bridget Fonda was very complicated.
My baby,
I love
she
her.
was. I miss her so much. Yeah, just incredible memories of that record, and also, and we'll obviously get into it more, but it also took us by surprise. I don't remember what we thought like the next record was going to sound like, or what we had told ourselves. And this is always like the joy and the mystery of being a Tori fan, right? Like you don't know what she's going to do or what she sees as her next. And I remember, I believe John Philip Chanel said to us that he knew that she was just going back to the essentials. That was his phrase to me. I remember it very, very clearly. He said, she's going back to essentials. And that's a really interesting word. So maybe we assumed, is it going to be a completely vocal and piano album? Will it be, right? And I had written in my closing piece for the Pop Matters Spotlight, like, what should Tori do in the future? And I suggested she should do an album that is just her and the piano and multiple keyboards, and just really kind of... take the reins and remind us all that she is the, queen of the confessional piano-based songwriting. And then you said to me, you're going to be surprised at what you hear, because we heard about the essentials and we sort of guessed that she would go to a really solo place, which arguably she kind of did. And we'll talk about that too. This is maybe one of the few records that has as many pure piano and vocal only songs. It's actually pretty rare on a Tori album. Even the ones that have some accompaniment still feel like solo songs. So she kind of did what we predicted, but then she also did not. We were hearing sounds and rhythms and programming and grooves that were unexpected.
It had been 5 years since she had put out a full album's worth of music, so this was another reason to anticipate, what the sound was going to be like, because so much time had passed, and the other things that she had been working on were, classical influences, holiday influences, other things like that. So orchestral pieces as well. So, and also her musical was happening at this time.
Right.
So a lot of these varied influences had sort of permeated their way into her music. So I think everybody, after all of those different things that happened or were going on after 5 years, was I think there was a lot of anticipation.
Kristen, what's your memory of hearing the record for the first time?
I heard a lot of it's a return to form and all this stuff. And I remember when I heard it, and I remember you, Joey, specifically talking about, how you really loved it and it was a return to form. And I was like, I don't know what a return to form means, because she is always doing something different. So I didn't really know what that meant. And then I was sort of like, I don't know if I agree that this is a return to form. And some of these songs have become canon Tori songs to me, and they were at the time. But then some songs I was like, I don't know that it doesn't resonate with me. So it's this weird kind of hot and cold reaction for me. But that's me personally.
I think you bring up a really important thing about a return to form, because I think a lot of the press and a lot of the reaction around this record, maybe because she was very publicly turning 50, maybe not. A lot of it was positioned in the press as a comeback, and I titled my piece on her. There's the word comeback is in the title, and I look at it now and I'm kind of annoyed by it, because she didn't go anywhere, and I do make that point in the piece. But the people who don't follow Tori's music or who are just sort of jumping on that bandwagon of return to form, or Tori going back to her roots, or her original style of music, or whatever they were saying. I think that's kind of diminishing what she did and what she does in general a little bit. And I feel like, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the comeback narrative is almost always one that's pinned on women who are aging. And it's like, oh, look, a woman can still do this at 50. Like, it's, we've seen it done before, but that narrative is very popular for people, especially if you're a good-looking person that can, sell the fantasy of being some, like hot 50-year-old out on a world tour. If that makes sense, I don't know. The whole idea of a comeback to me seems a little bit misogynist.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're right, and I also think that I don't think that she would have framed it that way, but I think that her PR people definitely put out that narrative, right? Like, oh, this is this will remind people of Little Earthquakes. Like, they always go back to that. This will remind them of those early songs. And some songs kind of do. Like, I remember, saying, I think in my review, that like Oysters will make you like question for a second, am I back in 1994? There's something about it that feels like an Under the Pink B-side or something, right? But is also its own thing it's its own thing that could have only existed at that time. So that's also what's special about Tori. She's not just, like, I don't know why I'm thinking about Katy Perry and her terrible new single, but I just in my mind, like thinking about all the discourse that's happening around like somebody who comes back after a few years and does something super regressive. That's like not, that doesn't say anything and is not saying anything about them or the world or the state of any, right? Like, and it's kind of making a statement that's, thinks they're making a statement, but the thing they're saying is like completely untrue, right? It's a woman's world and you're lucky to be living in it. It's like, are you? Like, you see what's going on? Like, don't 16 states have no access to abortion right now? Like, it's not a women's world. And like, Tori is actually in Geraldines, like, confronting the insecurities, and we'll get there when we mess, but much of this album is like sewed and drenching in like both affirmation but also deep insecurity that's very, very human and very normal. Like, she is talking about turning 50, she's literally saying it in song. Like, she's being as explicit as can be about that tension between feeling most yourself and also being scared that part of you is gone, right? That girlhood is gone. Girlhood going away is like a key concept on this album, and she says so, and she's very vulnerable about it, not only with her but thinking about her daughter, thinking about her mother, but it's not all gloom and doom. It's not all woe is me. There's also reclamation of the self throughout the record. So so that just goes. So I don't know why the Katy Perry thing stuck in my head, because I've been reading so much discourse about it, but it feels like really prime for right now. Like, that's an example of like returning. And is it a return to form or is it a regression of some kind, right? And I think that sometimes return to form, if you're not careful, can actually be code for some sort of regressive act. And that's not true for Tori. It's never been true. She's never done that. And she certainly didn't do it here. So I agree with you there.
Was the loss of girlhood, mourning the loss of girlhood, something you thought about during your first listen of this record, Kristen Keys?
I think...
At the ripe old age of 30.
You know what? Yeah, I didn't know what it was like to lose girlhood, and maybe I'm now just flirting with the loss of girlhood and then watching my daughter experience girlhood. I don't know, but someone on Reddit recently said there was people have been posting about Geraldines because of Dixie and because of the re-release. Yeah. And somebody said something where they were like, I didn't really get this album until I, started going through menopause. And I was thinking, like, man, like, maybe there's something there. Like, I don't want to admit it because I don't want to be like, oh, Tori's right. But maybe there's something there. Like, this year has been hard on me personally, and there is absolutely, like, a loss of something. And again, she's ahead of where I am at that point. But yeah, like I'm starting to like experience a little bit of that. So no, not on first listen, but I think it resonates with me more now than it did. I also like in my messing, there are songs that I fully intended to cut, and I was like, I can't cut it because I've either like found a new appreciation for it or a part of it that I think is just so important to the whole that I'm not going to cut. Which is also like why this podcast is fun. We're getting to re-experience things. But if you would have told me I would have found a new appreciation for this song now at 40 than even just a few years ago, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, I would have said no. But it's been true for this past few weeks for me.
I think out of all of the records that we've messed with so far, and probably will mess with, so out of all of the records, this one, to me, lent itself to just being really rearranged. I think that's because there's, admittedly, there's a sort of like through line of a couple of things running through there. It's not necessarily a concept record. It's not necessarily, Scarlet and all of the stories and the tales of Scarlet on the road. There's painterly things. There's a lot of color. There's, the thread of being the older woman helping younger women and helping them rise up or saving them or shielding them from bad things, which is really terrific. It lends itself well to being rearranged and messed with because it's so loose in concept and loose in structure. You have a few different threads running through there. You have art, you have artists, you have romance, you have an older woman helping a younger woman, giving her a hand up, you have mothers and daughters, of course. But Tori herself, when I interviewed her in 2014, and I'm going to pull up a quote really quick, said to me that each song on the record had to tell a story that you understood without needing to hear another song to make it make sense. And that's how I approach my playlist, and it really... if Tori is going to approach the album track listing that way, that's how I'm going to approach this record too. I like that these songs, even by Tori's own admission, don't necessarily need to relate to each other. They don't have to tell a story because each song contains its own story. And it's interesting to hear her talk about things that way because it's so much more on a micro level than a macro level than we're used to seeing from her. But I really like that. And to me, it reminded me of To Venus and Back in that way, that each song is like a star in its own galaxy that makes up a part of a constellation, Yeah. So I really think Geraldines, the songs are self-contained.
I love that.
And I think that is an interesting, to me, it's very evident in Wink, where she's saying, don't worry, it's not another concept album. You can just listen to the songs as you want. I think that's her way of saying it. This is, she called them secret sonic selfies. And they each sort of capture a moment for her, and it makes sense that she would say you don't have to be so concerned with following a story because each one will be its own thing. And I'm totally with you. This, I had said that Ocean to Ocean felt like a record that to me was slightly in the wrong order. When I listened to it, it didn't quite feel right, but it's mostly there. But of course, this is the original record of this could be rearranged. Now, what's tricky about it, and I think we'll get into it soon when we mess, is that there are so many solo moments that if you're not careful, you wind up with a lot of back-to-back quiet. And that, to me, and maybe some don't care about that, but I'm all about the dynamics and the transitions. So it made me a little batty trying to figure out. And as a result, I made some difficult cuts because I wanted to keep a balance that would not have existed otherwise. It was important to me, even if it, didn't matter to Tori necessarily, and she wants you to just take the song as you need it. I was really into and found myself constructing a narrative. So, kind of ironically, I find myself working from narrative here in a way that I haven't the past few episodes and past few albums. It started to emerge in a way that felt very coherent to me and made a lot of sense and felt like a very specific series of ideas and calls and responses. So it's interesting that she kind of intended the opposite, and I found myself doing that work anyway, you know, and it still works. It still makes sense.
Like Tori, if you don't want to put a concept on a record, we're here to foist one onto your record.
We're gonna
for
do
you.
it.
You can find one. Yeah,
We got
And
it.
I think that's a good time to pivot into messing with the master, guys.
Are we messing?
Yeah.
Let's
Are we
go.
doing it?
Let's mess.
So I'm going to refer to this interview that I did with Tori a little bit throughout this. I'm going to be as brief as possible, but she said some great things about this record in this interview with me. It's the final interview I did with her professionally in 2014. And we had a little bit of a cadence by then, so it was, you know, a little bit candid. And I was really always happy that she indulged my curiosity in the songs and being really specific about asking specific questions about the songs, because I know that's something that makes her she doesn't love doing that. No one does.
Right.
Talking about the same thing over and over and over is, you know, for artists really hard. Which, you know, when she was out there promoting Flickr and talking about Flickr for 6 months, I'd never seen her do that before. But in this interview, she really gave a lot of insight into her thoughts on some of the key tracks on the record. I asked specifically about several of them. So I was always really happy to have that. And I'll post this interview with Tori at some point during our social media campaign. So my first track, which I like to do, is the representative track for this era for me, you know, what I think is like the strongest track on the record. So I begin with Oysters. I can't think of a better song on this record. I live for this song. I live for it. Now, I live for it then. I talk about it all the time. I would put this in my top Tori songs, and in fact, I think I have put it in my top Tori songs, which will be in season 2, that theme of top Tori songs. So Oysters I like too, because if we are truly getting back to basics, if we're truly going to have a return to form, let's begin this album with a solo piano track that is pristine. The writer in Tori is really, you know, shining on this track, and I asked her about it and its connection to Judy Garland and, you know, what Judy Garland meant to her during the writing of this track. And she intimated that she'd been working on it for a really long time, that it was something that she took great care with. And she said the ruby slippers is an image that means so many things to so many people. And then she kind of started to drift off a little bit because she just said, you know, it's just really hard to describe. And she didn't want to describe it because she didn't want it to be... she didn't want her own perception of the song to influence her listeners, which I thought was really great. But she did say it was, you know, a turbulent, dark track for her. So starting it off with Oysters, and we always love to hear that one live too. Mm-hmm. So the balance of things, Joey, you brought up before, the cadence of this record. There are so many solo piano tracks that you could have an all solo piano track record. Maybe one of you will. I don't know. But I thought we needed to have a little bit more modernity in the second song, and maybe a little like look forward or look at contemporary Tori in that moment. And we go to 16 Shades of Blue right after Oysters.
That's good.
Yeah. And, you know, the kazoo is iconic. We love it. When we heard that song for the first time, when I heard it and when I watched Joey listen to it, it's just it's a fun song to watch somebody listen to. It's very unexpected. That was a very unexpected song on the record, I have to say for myself. I really like it. It's got a bluesy sort of like romantic yearning to it, and I think a real expansiveness. It really has a nice mood. I really enjoy the song a lot.
Kind of the 90s R&B thing to it a little bit with that sort of like string synths, right? There's something something living single about it.
I asked her about the song, and she talked about her vocal work on the song and layering and doing octaves and all of the interesting things she was doing vocally and the effects that were being put on there, because it's, you know, it's just a very textured and layered and produced song. And again, it has a vibe for me of a second, like a song that would be the second in the track listing on a typical or traditional Tori Amos album. So from 16 Shades of Blue, we go into Promise. It calls back to 16 Shades of Blue. You know, she should have started this at 3, and then we bring Larry has something to say about 16 Shades of Blue going into Promise. I'm not sure he agrees. I think he's disturbed.
He's reenacting the Promise video. Tori and Tash
Promise.
back and forth. That's
Stop.
exactly what's going on.
I can't handle this.
Oh no, he's so needy.
My baby girl is falling asleep and my dog is downstairs.
Be there.
I can't believe Larry fucked up my groove like that. So from 16 Shades of Blue, we go into Promise, which is not the first time Tori has featured her daughter, Natashya, on vocals. But I would say it's certainly the first time where she featured her in such a prominent and leading way. Really warm organ work on that. A really contemporary sound again that harkens back to a little bit of maybe like 70s soul. Mm-hmm. And I liked the relation to 16 Shades of Blue. She should have started this at 3, and then in the next track, having her daughter on the track, I think was a nice moment for me. And then from Promise, we're going to go to Rose Dover, which I think is another good sort of bridge between those topics that are explored, being, a young person being pushed to do something interesting. So from Rose Dover, I went into Maids of Elfinmere.
Oh my!
Early on in the record, and when I think of Little Earthquakes, I think Little Earthquakes has some moments that are a little bit like medieval, a little bit Lord of the Ringsy, and I think Maids of Elfinmere, calls back to that vibe, that that Renaissance fair vibe a little bit that you hear a little bit on Little Earthquakes, and I wonder if that's an intentional thing. But it's been interesting because that's a song I don't typically listen to. I skip usually, but I listen to it a lot. I had a lot of trouble fitting it in, but I'm happy with where it ended up. So after Maids of Elfinmere, we go into Trouble's Lament. Big fan of that song. I think it's got a good vibe to it as well. Again, it is more of a classic Tori vibe. I think we might hear it on a record like Scarlet's Walk. It has a really sort of soft folk vibe, propulsive, maybe even has a little bit of a rockabilly hint to it with the guitars. So from Trouble's Lament, we go into Wedding Day. And I just want to say one other thing about Trouble's Lament really quickly, and my apologies, but we have got to call out that fantastic live solo version of Trouble's Lament.
Oh, yeah.
Is one of my favorite performances of this era. She fucking killed in that performance, especially Trouble's Lament. I'm always kind of gobsmacked that she doesn't play that song because, by the looks of that performance at least, she was really into it.
And she is armed and will fight for the souls of girls around the world, standing up to Satan, dancing on Saint Michael's sword. I'm on her side in this brutal war. Don't cry, baby. Danger wants to find me, I'll let him in, he can find me.
Well, another example of, I think we talked about this previously, that there are all these little like missing spots in later Tori albums where you're like, if Trouble's Lament solo sounds like that, which is in its way like another version in a very different way, but like another iteration of like, wait a second, Juarez solo can sound like that, right? So you start to go through these things where it's like what she's capable of showing us in terms of like what a song, and that's, we talked about 29 years sounding so amazing on Tiny Desk, right? And sounding so different. And so that's that thing about Tori that's so special, that, you know, it sounds one way on record and a completely, like, that is like a completely different arrangement. It's new music. Like, you listen to it on the record, you listen to that solo performance, they're different songs. They're the same song, but they're different, you know, like they are literally different. She's not doing any of that playing on the album version. Like, it doesn't exist. Like, you listen to them, they're not the same. Anyway, go ahead. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about it. And I think we get a little bit of that on the tour with some of the older songs, you know, being revitalized through just, you know, their solo reinterpretations. So it's interesting that for a lot of these tracks, she added a backing track in her live performance, but did a lot of her older stuff in a really new and vibrant solo way. So in that way, it was maybe a callback to, you know, or a return to form, or a callback to some of her older days of playing, just, you know, her and the piano out on the road. So after Trouble's Lament, we go into Wedding Day. And this last sequence of songs I had to have grouped together. So it's Wedding Day, Selkie, Wild Way, Weatherman. And it's the romance section. It's so warm. And I think really just these are very tender songs. And she did say to me in the interview, and I'm paraphrasing, but she talked about having male characters on this record, and she was telling men's stories on some of these songs, and she pointed out Weatherman as one of those songs. And I believe she pointed out Selkie as well. But interesting to see these sort of like warm romantic songs from her point of view at this stage of her career. I asked her about Wild Way and talking about the complexity and intensity of a long-term relationship, and I wondered what kept her in love and how she kept bringing fresh perspectives to that topic. And I think she liked the question, and she said, you know, being in love means all kinds of things, but being truly in love with somebody means you visited every tick on the clock, or you're about to, and you have to jump off the clock and decide, oh no, this is a little bit too intense for me. But I think the upside is about having an involved relationship, because you really explore all kinds of different situations and experiences. If it does challenge you both, it can also make you more in love. It was nice to talk to her about
That's
that
really
stuff.
nice.
I love that.
And you know, I love I've always loved Selkie, and I just think it's such a great story encapsulated in that short space. It really tells a beautiful story. Again, loved seeing it live when we saw it in Boston in 2023. It was a beautiful rendition with Merman, with the sea salty air. It was great. I can't get enough of that story. Weatherman, strong storytelling there as well. And I think Tori tells a story in another interview, not with me, but someone else. Why bother? But you know, she said that she almost didn't have Weatherman on the record, and Mark had her put it on at the last minute and said, you cannot be serious that you're not going to put this on the record. So she did. And that's probably
Thank
the male
you.
energy. Thank you, Mark
Mark
Hawley.
Hawley.
That's crazy.
This song is like a blooming onion to me. Like it constantly
It's so gorgeous.
unfolds, and I discover something else I liked about it. And it's
so complicated. It's a complex song. It's got romance. It's got tragedy. It's got it really is such a rich and complex song. And again, it's just Tori's voice and the piano. That's it. And what she's able to do with that, to me, is one of the core tenets of why I, you know, am so fascinated and moved by her work, is that she can tell a story like this in so many different kinds of ways, and she chooses to really pare it down and really get to the core of what's going on in the song. Yet she is still also like very abstract with the way she actually literally uses color to paint the lyrics, you know. And we talked a lot about, you know, this song as well. So I'm after, you know, we're not done yet, so there's still more. After Weatherman, it's Unrepentant Geraldines, the title track, which is sort of like bombastic and wild and fun and exuberant, and not like anything else on the record. It's very, it stands on its own really independently. I love the structure that she's experimented with in the past, this sort of dual structure where, one half of the song is, very lush, and then the other half of the song is completely something else, maybe a little bit more pared down, a different mood altogether, but still joined. And then my final song for Unrepentant Geraldines, after the title track Unrepentant Geraldines, is Forest of Glass. Obviously, and I will hold on all commentary on Forest of Glass for now, but it's just a very special song. I've always loved it, but I love it a lot now.
You love it a lot now. Yeah.
So that's how I did it. That's how I messed with this album. I had to do 3 cuts. America is not on the record. It just didn't fit the vibe that I was going for with this track listing. I couldn't find a place to make it fit. I like it. I think it's a good song. It's got some really lovely melodies. But for me, it just wasn't fitting in here. Invisible Boy, I had to cut because there was already, in my view, for my playlist, I had enough solo piano on my playlist, and putting in one more just for me threw it off a little bit. It didn't balance for me, and I would prefer, obviously, Forest of Glass to Invisible Boy if I was going to make a choice between solo piano songs. And then I cut Giant's Rolling Pin as well, and I listened to it a lot. I'm going to admit, I know it's not necessarily a fan favorite, we shall say.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe it is.
Giants Rolling Pin fans, come out, talk to us, let us know your story, tell us why you love the song, all of it. We want to hear. So Giants Rolling Pin was just a little bit for me. I wasn't going for whimsical on my playlist. I think you could go in a whimsical direction with this playlist, and it would be fine. It would be great. It could be a completely different vibe, completely different story. Maybe one of you have made a whimsical playlist. I doubt it, but it's possible. So that's why I cut Giants Rolling Pin. It's fun, but on my playlist, it just was a little bit too slapsticky for the story that I was trying to tell, which was very, very romantic and mature.
Okay, that was beautiful. I desperately need to mess next because my playlist has so many reflections of Mathieu, and I don't know if I was surprised by that, but
mine does too. Actually, I think we might wind up all being a little bit similar, which is interesting. But go ahead, I'm ready for you to mess.
I'm so curious. Okay, so I'm going to start messing, and something surprised me in what I picked, but I was LOLing Matthew at you with your Oysters and then 16 Shades, because I'm going to start 16 Shades and then Oysters. Ooh. And I think a lot about when you guys say there's a thesis of the thesis of the album, right? And I think 16 Shades of Blue in a lot of ways is that. Actually, I think a lot of these songs could be the thesis of the album. I think there is actually now 10 years later, I do see in some ways why someone would say it was a return to form. I understand it more now. But 16 Shades is so honest. I love the kind of jazzy bluesy element to it, of course. There's the kazoo. But I do think it's just very honest about where she was, how she felt. I think if you could just sit down and have a conversation with her, it would be 16 Shades. And I think Oysters is sort of the artistic, kind of, again, the songwriter's part, the songwriter's package of what that is. To me, Oysters is Canon Tori, top song ever, incredible. I actually really struggle with where to put it because I love it so much, and I'm is this album just Oysters to me? In some ways it is, right? I don't know if you ever feel that way about an album where you're this album above all else, it is Oysters. That's what this album is for me. So I wanted to get to it right away. But I love that Maddie had Oysters 16 and I had 16 and Oysters. So then I go...
I just want to say, I do think that they both comment on age in a really interesting way. Mm-hmm. And Tori was really unafraid to talk about age in all of the press that she was doing. She was really open about it, really honest about it, and had a lot of really insightful things to say about it. She talked about menopause a lot. let's normalize people talking about stuff like that. Let's normalize women who are celebrities or famous talking about issues that actually affect their, fans, not me, but most of their fans and people in the real world. I think that's really relatable. And, maybe that's why there was that call of return to form, because when Tori first came out, there was something so relatable about her music and about Little Earthquakes. But I like the way that those two songs in particular speak to each other about age.
And so then I have what I consider my very romantic part of the album. It's a run of songs, which is Wedding Day. And this is very similar to what Matthew did. Wedding Day, Selkie, Wild Way, Invisible Boy, Weatherman. So that's like a really meaty chunk I just said. I know, Matthew, you cut Invisible Boy. But I think all of those songs are very romantic. And also, like, for me, Selkie is not as... I could not stand that song until Boston. And this is the magic of Tori Amos, where, like, we're all together. And it's, of course, an incredible show. Like, the show was so good. But what made me love Selkie is... I could tell how much she loved the song and in her performing it. I could tell, like, just, like, how she delivered every line. Like, she just, like, laid it down, like, so gently. Every line was just, like, perfectly kind of, like, placed. And I could just tell she was really feeling it. And it was so funny to me to have a song I absolutely couldn't stand, probably had only listened to it 10 times total, and then being like, I'm obsessed with this song, and now this is one of my favorite songs from this album, and it just, like, it warms my heart to think about how much she wanted to perform it for us, and just kind of, like, allowing myself to, like, get in the romantic vibe with her, and Wedding Day, little Ren Fairy for me, but I do really like the layered vocals, and I think that it has, like, a nice little upbeat tempo. If you're going 16 Shades to Oysters, I think you want, like, a little bit of a kick, and I think the drums are there, and I think it's really good. So Wedding Day, Selkie, Wild Way. I almost opened with Wild Way, which was one of my most favorite. I know, it's like one of my most favorite songs from this album right away.
Me too.
I just really love a love song starting with I Hate You.
And it's a missed single opportunity too. There could have been a great video for it and radio push. It has a very, very mainstream flavor to it that if it had been sold to, like, any other musician, probably would have had a hit with it, right? Like,
Joey, I remember when we were listening to this was one, like, a standout for you. You were really into Wedding Day when we first heard the record.
I think Invisible Boy was one that I did consider not having in the playlist, but again, with these AirPods, her throwing those, like, layered kind of vocals, the echoing vocals, it was just too haunting not to leave behind. Again, like, I got a better appreciation of the song and the re-listen, and just thinking about, like, that, like, really dramatic throwing of that echoing vocal that felt really nice to have, kind of like almost like entering mid-album, where you kind of want something really, like, stand out. And so I picked it there. And then we go into Weatherman, which I think is fucking genius. I think it's a poem come to life. I mean, I think the songwriting is beautiful. I think the music is beautiful. I think her delivery on the vocals is beautiful, but it is so poetic. And again, like, to speak Tori's language, a blooming onion, because I'm sure that she could enjoy a blooming onion from time to time. I just feel like there is so much there. Tori, come get a blooming onion with us, girl.
Is the episode title going to be Unrepentant Geraldines Awesome Blossom?
Maybe. Tori, let's have an awesome blossom. I am ready to talk about Weatherman and talk about how this song is just a billion layers of onion, deep fried onion. That song is just nothing to say. Okay, so Weatherman, and then, guys, we're going to go, shocker, into Forest of Glass. Why Forest of Glass? Well, I mean, we have the weather elements. I'm, like, going a little bit into, like, the narrative and the storytelling. I want the weather to lead us into, like, another, like, kind of, like, climate. But, Forest of Glass is dangerous. It's delicate. It's scary. It's all the things. But we're going to use it as a transition where we're going to transition it back into kind of the childhood realm of things, where then we go Rose Dover, Promise, and Dixie. I think, Joey, you'll probably talk about Rose Dover, because you love it so. But it, of course, goes really nicely with Promise. And I think that, like, this forest of glass element, Rose Dover reminds me sort of like of a through the looking glass type of Alice in Wonderland, like waking dream kind of thing. So I think it also is a nice transition piece into something like a little more lucid, like Promise and Dixie, which are very literal. And so I like using that as a mechanism back into the literal. And then we just need to pick up the pace. And so we hit it with Geraldines, which is so fun. But I really particularly love the vicar's wife element. And I liked that, thinking about Dixie and her mom and bringing it back to the vicar's wife. And then Trouble's Lament after that, which, I think is a song that could go anywhere. I know why she put it up front in the album, but I kind of like a secret banger towards the end. Mm-hmm. And then my last song, guys, I hope this doesn't cause a controversy. My last song is Darkest Hour from The Light Princess.
Oh, I love Light Princess. That's interesting.
Okay.
Tell me more.
I'm going to tell you more. And Matthew's upset. He's turning red. He's upset. So the very first time, again, I fell in love with Forest of Glass was in Austin 2014 when she played it. Mm-hmm. And I knew Forest of Glass, but, like, didn't love it, which is crazy to think now. 10 years. What? And in my memory, I thought it was Darkest Hour. In my memory, like, I got the songs mixed up. And then... Weird. Yeah, I know, it's really weird. But, like, now I hear so much of, like, Geraldines in Darkest Hour / I hear Geraldines in The Light Princess in ways that I never thought I would. I want Darkest Hour so much to live on a real album. It is such a Tori Amos song. The lyrics, to me, are, again, like, going back to the thesis of Tori Amos. My silent scars burn endlessly. I feel light even in my darkest hour. To me, that is Tori Amos. So, I don't know. To me, they make sense together. Darkest Hour and Forest of Glass. I know it's heavy. I know I've gone very piano heavy, but I really love that song.
Well, we got to hear it, I think the only performance of it in 2017. She played it in New York.
So in the night, show me the way. Let darkness come clean. And I'm white shadow to stay as I give the stars my silence glass on the
I think that's a good addition. Another solo piano track that's really powerful, and I also really like Highness in the Sky from that era as well. Really, and I think honestly both of those songs could fit feasibly onto this record.
They really bring a Geraldine's energy. Like, I see how these things were all written at the same time.
Totally.
I love Highness in the Sky as well, which to me, like, does read a little more musical, like Darkest Hour. I mean, it definitely feels like a musical song, but I do feel like you could, like, kind of slot it in and nobody would know that it came from a musical. And, like, but anyway,
I agree with that. I think that's a really good thing to point out. I wanted to just jump in one other track, and I mentioned this in the text, I believe, but there was another track that I thought maybe Joey will go there, we'll see, but I thought thematically, lyrically, I looked to the past, and I thought a song like Garlands could really fit on this record. because it's very explicitly about painters and paintings.
Yeah.
And
was that your song that you say you didn't put on the list?
I didn't, yeah, but I thought about it, but I have it on another record, so I couldn't put it on this one. Okay. That's my rule.
I totally see garlands here, but yes, I respect the rules being okay, so that's it. So I ended up with Darkest Hour, but I had to put it somewhere because
I like that.
It feels like Geraldines to me. So
talk about what you cut.
Okay, so I cut 3 songs, if my notes are correct, which is Maids of Elfamere, which give Ren Fair vibes to me, but it also gives me like a wedding day warm-up, possibly like a Selkie thing. Like those 2 songs do both of what Elfamere does to me, so I didn't feel like I needed it. Giants Rolling Pin, which to me is full B-side energy. Now I think the production is certainly like finished full album, like she's paid attention to it, but the silliness to me, it's like a silly song. And then America, I think again the thesis is there, but it's just a Beatles song to me, and as you know, hot take, I am not a Beatles fan. So, and Tori, I know, loves the Beatles and is very inspired by the Beatles, and in a lot of places, like, I'm down with it or I can get into it, but in this case for America, I added so much that I was fine with it, but to me, they got cut because of the Beatles. Sorry, girl.
Paul McCartney, we're looking at
Paul.
you.
Not into it. No offense.
Joseph Valise.
Not opening a doorway at all.
Globally, yeah. Let me, all right.
We are so ready for this.
I'm ready.
Mine is different than yours, but there are patches where there is similarity, and I think that we clustered a lot of things together, which I think speaks to the fact that despite Tori wanting every song to sort of exist as it was without the need for maybe a particular order, and all of us thinking that it had space to be rearranged, despite all that, we still found similarity and commonality. And I think that is a testament to the strength of the songwriting. And I think truly, this is always true for Tori, but there's something about Geraldines that feels so earnest and so tender. That was a word that was used earlier. There's an earnestness and a tender and a sweetness about the music. You'd be hard-pressed to find songs where you don't believe that Tori believes it, but there's something about many of the songs on this record that feel like she really feels them. And it's interesting that it took you so long to love Selkie, Kristen. I've always loved it, but I think I remember our conversation early on when it came out. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I remember us having a conversation where I think you didn't like that it was just like the retelling of a myth, like a story, that it wasn't like its own thing. Like you didn't like need, like I vaguely remember, and I feel that way about Maids of Elfamere. I'll tell you right up front, I cut it. I'll tell you before I do anything. I cut the shit out of that song because you know how I feel about songs that are about nothing, and Maids of Elfamere is about nothing. So I got rid of it because it's just her like saying, "Oh, let me just describe this painting for you that I'm looking at," and I don't like it. Beautiful, beautiful piano. The vocals are technically very lovely. Hate the accompaniment to it. Like I actually have very strong feelings. Maybe if it was completely solo, I'd feel differently. But I feel like you and I had a conversation about, and she's never played it live, so she must feel similarly as well. And
Tori.
I just wonder if that was something, like my memory could be deceiving me, but I feel like we both had a similar thing about like songs that are just like her, describing something else. But I didn't feel that way about Selkie. Selkie felt so truly emotional and so romantic, and just the delivery.
I'm not comfortable with romance, as you know, but also like I'm not into like that sea mythology shit. Like I'm not into that. And
you love dolphin songs. Stop it.
It required the sea air and Boston and like literally the most amazing 4th of July ever to bring it together for me. I'm just not into like that type of mythology, but just seeing how much
and maybe
loved
also
it,
the insertion of Merman too reinforced something, right?
Yes.
So I'm with you. So okay, let me get to my messing. I'm jumping ahead, but let me get to it.
Okay.
So my album. My track list begins with Oysters. There can be no other opener than Oysters.
You guys.
I completely.
What's happening?
I see you. We see each other, Matt. Because to me, Oysters, like you said it actually best yourself, Kristen, the album is Oysters. It is, that song is such an achievement that no matter how anybody feels about the rest of the album, it's Oysters. You know, each album, we're lucky enough that every Tori album has one of those moments. And I hope that any listener or fan in good faith, even if they've strayed from Tori in later years, also agrees that there's always an Oysters. There's always a song, one song at least, that is emblematic and is top tier, because she is top tier. And even if she can't, 30 years on, create what everybody wants all the time, there's always a moment, I think, for everybody where we recognize like this is special. And it goes back to that idea of reflecting on girlhood, the death of girlhood, but also, I feel like I'm not a woman, so I can't say this, but based on a lot of watching of the Golden Girls throughout my life, I feel like that there's a real conversation that happens where you go from like a girl to a woman, but then when women go through menopause, it's like, what are you now? There was a time in society where it was like, I think of Blanche thinking she's pregnant and then finding out that she actually has menopause, that she's going through menopause, and how devastating it is for her in that episode. It's such a good episode because she's only like in her 50s, early 50s. And, Tori is being very, she's at every concert, she was talking about having menopause and forgetting lyrics and needing lyrics. Like she was discussing menopause, turning 50. And I think that there's something there about another death of a certain, cycle in the life of a girl/woman. But also, 50 is the new black, right? It's not,
Correct.
you don't have to shrivel up and go away, right? And Tori was very defiant, very unrepentant in saying, I'm still here and I'm going to still make music and I'm going to still do my thing and I'm going to do it on my own, completely solo, alone in Cornwall with my husband, my sound engineer. So Oysters, I think, it presents, Maddie, talked about Tori and his discussion with her, and so I don't have much more to say about the song other than the fact that it's so epic and so beautiful, but says all of those things, and sets that tone that Tori is saying, hey, I'm actually going to be really vulnerable. Like she's always vulnerable, but I'm gonna be very vulnerable and honest with you about my insecurities and my doubts about myself as a woman, about myself as a mother, about myself as a wife, a musician. She tells us in Oysters all of those things.
Yeah, no, you brought up something that's really important that I hadn't really thought about. And when you said that, Tori and Mark are off in Cornwall creating this record, I mean, that's one of the reasons that I've always admired Tori, right? Is she's able to go out and create her art. She's able to go out and make music, write, what have you, without any influence from the outside world, literally carte blanche to, have artistic freedom for the most part. I mean, I think she weighs commercial prospects and weighs certain expectations and weighs, whatever. But, I think that that's such a thrilling freedom, right? To just really be able to go out there, make what you want, and do it your way, and not have the influence of a record company or a corporation or what have you telling you what to do. I mean, that's, it's been to varying degrees in her career, but I mean, being able to, move in and out of the entertainment business is a really hard skill to master and stay relevant through that entire time, through the age of 50, especially at 50 when women are very often kicked to the curb, whether it's film or music. So I've always really admired that sense of freedom that you get, whether the music lands for you as a longtime Tori fan or not. I think that you have to admire the impetus behind it. And I'm sorry, you're only one song in, and we're having this
I'm
discussion.
I'm glad, and I just want to say one other thing. I think you all and listeners of the podcast will understand when I think of when I close my eyes and I visualize Oysters. We talk about how we feel songs and we see them. That moment in the Silent All These Years video where the little girl is running, but the quality of it is like sketchy and fuzzy, and Tori is kind of running after her. Oysters is that, it's that movement and that from down the hall reflective echo, like it feels like a vibration, an echo. It feels like, imagine 50-year-old Tori singing this to 27-year-old Tori in the Song All These Years video, like looking back and saying like, we're going to be here, in a lot of ways. Oysters feels like a response to Song All These Years to me. And I think of the video, I think of so many elements of it, because I think you almost can't divorce the music video of Song All These Years from the song itself. And Oysters feels like a continuation to me from there. So we go from Oysters into Wedding Day, because I'm thinking about the doubts and the insecurities that she's having. But Wedding Day is this, for such a romantic album, like Wedding Day is, I love Wedding Day. I wish that she performed it with the band sometime. I think that it has just that great moment of piano in it in the chorus. I like the pre-chorus so much. I don't really hear Ren Fair. I can't quite describe what it is that I do hear, but I push back on the Renaissance Fair element of Wedding Day a little bit. It feels like darker to me. It feels...
I'm from Texas, as you know, and Houston is home of the Renaissance Fair.
But it's got that great Mellotron. I love a Mellotron moment. I love that it uses Wurlitzer. I love that we hear all these different textures. I love that it's fast.
Love it.
The Mellotron sounds like flutes to me, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the Mellotron.
And I think
you got
I
it.
think that's where I pick up the vibe of like a band of like, Robin Hood's band of merry men in the forest with their instruments, maybe.
Totally fine. But regardless, I think that song is speaking to like very clearly like this like insecurity. Like, do you dream of our wedding day? Right? Like, I'm looking at you like I run back to your arms again, safe they're back in your, like, it's so interesting to like think of her like having coffee and looking at Mark and like thinking to herself like, does this fucker still love me? You know what I mean? Like, and when you're with a long-term partner, like that's very true. Like you look at each other's face and you study and you think, do you dream of our wedding day? Like I always joke to Alex, I'm like, I always ask him, did you dream of me? And he'll like always, and like, pour his coffee in the cup. But like I say it as a joke, but I feel like, I don't know. I feel like after a long time, like you wonder, like, am I there in your dreams? Are you dreaming of other people? Like, like I think we all go through that. And I think that it's, I love that moment. She, takes off the mask at the end that hides all this from your gaze. Right. And I love that ending. I just love that little like kind of like funky note at the end.
Hold on real quick.
Yeah.
Like, I know that we're, again, only a few songs in, but I've always thought about like under a blanket on Bluebell Knoll, under a starry night holding us close, Jupiter winked at the earth. I always thought that these were references to Venus because like, she's getting married during this time.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I think that there's something there for sure about like long relationship and like back to like the exciting days,
And Joey, did you meet your now husband around this time?
I met him at the end of 2011.
Yeah. Sort of.
But we were still kind of, were in a newer relationship.
But we were engaged in 2014. We married in 2015.
So you were dreaming of your wedding day when we heard this.
But actually, yes, actually, literally planning a wedding. Yeah, but it doesn't feel like, it's not a Jackie strength. It's a wedding day. Actually, feels like it could have been written for the Beekeeper. Like,
yeah, it's a little.
It has
edgy.
a vibe to it that feels like a little
edgy.
So she goes from wedding day, that insecurity from herself, doubting the marriage, thinking about her importance to her husband. There's sort of she's in this place where like she's pleading for everybody around her to sort of like affirm who they are and like they're not changing too fast. So the third song is Rosed Over, because now she's turning to her daughter. If you see Rosed Over, that's like encouraging her. stay young, stay in that imaginary place. Don't you don't have to throw it away yet. Like, you're still young, you don't have to give it up. And I love Rosed Over. I think it's such a surprising, weird song. I think when you move Rosed Over early, it has very big third song energy. That, like, the way it comes in, the verses are dark, then you have the lullaby of the chorus. We listen to a lot of ABBA these days because Elio fucking loves ABBA. So, and I hear so much ABBA in that I've been thinking lately bridge. If you call it a bridge, it comes so early in the song. It feels like, I don't know, like, very hard to describe. I've listened to a lot of ABBA lately, and it feels like an ABBA moment. And she doesn't seem to have ever covered ABBA, which is odd to me. I've looked. I don't think she's ever done an ABBA song.
Has she done Dancing Queen?
I don't think so.
Am I making that up?
So. I looked and didn't find anything. I could be wrong, but and
I don't see it.
And I fucking love the scattering of birds above her head part. It's just this like Frankenstein's monster of like these amazing moments that are just make a weird song. But it makes sense because she's encouraging her daughter to still be playful and still like kind of like sew shit together and make something. So she kind of sews together this song. It feels very earnest, very sweet, very yearning. I love that there's piano. I love that there's organ. I love that there's Rhodes. I love when she like very intentionally layers keyboards, and I like the sort of, I didn't for a while, but I've come to really love that weird fake clapping sound that happens because I'm thinking about her in the woods, like playing hide and seek with Rosed Over. Like, I think it's a great song. And we go from Rosed Over to 16 Shades of Blue, because here she is trying to convince her daughter to stay as she is while she is reckoning with being pulled away from this part of, her girlhood, womanhood into, we have 3, we have 33, we have 50, we have these ages that are clearly meaningful for Tori. And it's about herself, but it's also like, seems to continue this like moment of trying to reckon with both what it means for her and be a good example for her daughter, while trying to, figure this out for herself. Like, I think that's really, we can't discount, like, I don't know what Tori's music would have been like if she had a boy instead of a girl, right? Like if she had a son instead of a daughter. It makes you wonder how she would have dealt with or sort of recreated these things for her daughter to pass on to her. So I think it's very fortuitous. It makes a lot of sense that Tori Amos is, working through issues of the feminine and what it means to be a woman, and thinking about it not only in the context of herself but also of her daughter. So we go from 16 Shades of Blue to Dixie. I suddenly have this moment where it's like where she is trying to speak to her daughter and is hitting a wall in some ways with this because there's a desperation to those songs and those sequences too, and then to suddenly like stop and take a quiet moment and to think about just window shopping with her mom. Just this simple, beautiful song that's about her mother towards the end of her mother's life. And it's never quite clear if she's reflecting on being a little girl with her mother or if she's singing about now, and I don't think it matters. But I think it's a calming moment for her. It's a centering moment for her that kind of closes out that sequence of songs. And we go from Dixie to Promise, because Promise, Tosh steps in and is really, really holding her mother's hand now, right? Giving Tori confidence that Tori, she says, promise not to say, and Tori's like, first thing is that I'm getting too old, and Tasha's like, no, like, don't say, like, and so
no,
there's
you
this
hoe.
like, yeah, like, what do you mean you're too old? Like, don't say that. And it's really beautiful. I think Promise is really gorgeous. I think I wrote in my review of Geraldines all those years ago that to my ear, Promise ends on a very similar final note as the Beekeeper does. And I think that that's on purpose, that she holds and sustains that Hammond note.
Okay, we could do a whole episode on this because Promise, to me, with these AirPods, if you go in that second half, that organ is just dark. It is specifically is calling back the Beekeeper for sure.
Yeah, totally.
And it's just like almost, I don't know, something about it. You think it's going to be this. Somebody online like kind of described it as like her best version of Elton John, which I kind of liked because I was almost going to cut it. And I was like, I can't cut it. I think it's important for the story, especially with Dixie, which I knew I wanted to include. But man, that organ really kicks in and you're like, oh, again, this is Tori Amos. This is where like something deeper. She holds it for a while, you know, like the song doesn't just end on a happy note. It like, you know, like it's a callback. Yes. Yeah. So from Promise, we go to Trouble's Lament, because now that Tori has sort of had this like moment with her daughter in which she is, I think her that tenderness. Now she's saying, wait, but you know, I'm going to protect you, but you also need permission to sin. You need permission to explore and find trouble. And I will protect you from it. I will tell you what I know about trouble and about Satan. But Tori, you know, we know this, you know, the generation needs a lesson in sin. I got a kid that calls the cops before the party started, and drive all night. Like she wants youth to get into some good trouble, I think. And so it makes a lot of sense for Trouble's Lament to follow Promise. Again, you've said everything that needs to be said about that exquisite solo version. And then from Trouble's Lament, we go to Weatherman. My note is Mark saying, "Where's my wife?" Because she's like sort of been on this just like journey, and you know, though I think that the story she's telling is of a widow who has lost his wife, I sort of reappropriated it here to think about him in the distance, kind of like watching her go through this self-discovery and being left behind a little bit, I think, and a yearning for her. So she's not gone, but she's gone to him momentarily. And not in terms of content, but I always think of this as like the most, if I had to choose one song where I think Tori is doing her very best early Joni Mitchell, I think it's Weatherman. I listen to this song with the arrangement all the time. They feel like sister songs to each other. This feels like Tori's response to the arrangement. And if you don't know that Joni song, I recommend everybody go listen to it. And I think you'll hear what I hear. Weatherman's incredible. I think it's one of her very, very best. And just perfectly produced, perfectly written, perfectly performed. A great example of telling a story that might not be directly culled from her life, but is so convincingly rendered for us. I just love it. In her quotes on talking about the album, she's like, this is one that Mark and Tosh were getting used to hearing all the time in Florida in the morning. I want to say it was like Christmas time in the quote, but there it's like, I can, like when I imagine Tori doing her thing, I absolutely imagine her like cannot separate herself from the creative process. And so if that happens all night sometimes, if that happens in like a few weeks span, like whatever the creative process is, like she kind of follows it, which could mean that like she is singing Weatherman at 4 a.m. in Florida around Christmas time. And so that is very much what I picture her process to be like. So I hear that, I can see that quote when I'm listening to the song.
So I go from Weatherman, the response from Tori is Wild Way.
Ooh, like, I love it.
You knew that, you know, you loved my Wild Way. What do you mean, where am I? Right? And I think those two just, you know, on the original track listing, like I think the Wild Way, Wedding Day, Weatherman, WWW trifecta is actually really brilliant and really, you know, beautiful. And I've split it up for reasons of, or reordered it for reasons of this the conceit of the podcast, but I think that she did a really good job stacking those together, and Wild Way feels like a response that makes a lot of sense to Weatherman, because it's like a little bit like you knew what you were signing up for. Let me be wild in my way. It's love. She's melting for this person, and she can't deny the way she feels, right? Like the smirk inherent in the lyric "I hate you" is just so. I don't know. It's just so evident. Like I think it's just an incredible song. So we go from Wild Way to Forest of Glass, where there is this now focus on this man who she is following into his forest of glass, right? If you love him, you will follow, right? It's about creativity. It's about listening to the muses, but also finding a way to be present and be there for others in her life, particularly the man that she loves. And I think that it's a real... it's so beautiful. I mean, I know what the song means to you. I think we all totally adore this song. It's wild to me that it did not make the album proper. What's wrong with her? I mean, that's just the way, and I think maybe she thought. I mean, and she performed it quite a bit on the tour, so she treated it like, oh, you all love this B-side, but we don't get B-sides in the same way anymore. So I think if she maybe could have. If she knew that we would not have the opportunity to have access to the song, if she could have, foresaw that, then maybe she would have made other decisions about it. But it's such it feels so epic in scope. It feels like the way the lyrics, the vocals are layered, and the way it's recorded feels like it has a connection to Cooling a little bit. There's something about it that fits in that sort of like, section of my Tori gallery in my mind. It's incredible. Yeah.
And I think it's worth shouting out that Forest of Glass maybe was born from a lyric in another song, Your Ghost, from Night Hunters. We've heard that phrase Forest of Glass before, so maybe this is a continuation or an expansion on that theme.
Or maybe she pulled them
Forest
apart,
of Glass was first.
Yeah.
It
would be interesting to know a little bit more about those connections. But Tori's always sort of connecting new and old and referencing herself and referencing her lyrics and language. That's what makes for a entire career's worth of work that you can just sort of continually remix and rejigger to have new playlists. So anyway,
and giving us that clue by having Your Ghost exist 2 years before this album, it tells us, it gives us like more context. We can speak more confidently about who she is writing about and who she is singing to, and it feels like that relationship from Your Ghost carrying over into Forest of Glass, and just the imagery of a forest of glass is just incredible. So yeah,
I was just gonna say, is that how you end your Unrepentant Geraldines?
No,
there's more.
We're almost done.
Let's do
He's
it.
got more.
A 10-songer, no way. Then we go to Unrepentant Geraldines, because now there's union again, and they are creating together. We go to this song that has drum programming and all these interesting musical shifts, and she is empowered. She is unapologetic. She is unrepentant. She is calling on, the Marys of the field, thinking about the vicar's wife. It's groovy, it's sensual, it's a bit antagonistic, but also very Earth Mother, and it feels like it does sound like its own thing, like nothing like the rest of the album. But I love the idea of it as sort of this culmination of this searching and this series of insecurities and doubts that she is reckoning with, and trying to puzzle out, and feeling just this confidence. And I love that second half. I love the vicar's wife bit. Again, I mean, they're completely different entities, but like it feels Datora-esque in like the splitting of the parts, like doing something kind of radically different and then finding this like other mood shift that reorients us. Like, wait a second, like what does the vicar's wife have to do with the previous part? It really forces you to think about why did she stick these two together, you know? And she's never performed it in its entirety. She's done bits of Geraldine, and she's done the vicar's wife by itself a few times. But it's interesting that these feel like a real welding of complementary ideas, but they feel like just because she doesn't end with the collaboration with Mark. She ends with this, you know, she's by herself right. And I love that she says, you know, you'll find she plays guitar sometimes with her band, but she plays the bass like a messiah. Like I love that idea of like, well, sometimes she has a band, but sometimes she's on her own. And I think that that's a clue to what she's doing. And for me, the album ends after this with America, because even though it is very different than much of the rest of the content of the record, in this moment of self-discovery, there's privilege inherent that she is taking the time to like think about herself, and in the moment she has to do that for herself, but by being so immersed in a personal journey of rediscovery, she kind of falls asleep at the wheel like so many of us did, and we slept through this coming storm, this political realignment and shift that was happening in our country. And it's a beautiful, I think, foreboding setup for what's to come politically in the world a few years later, and also the next album, which is Native Invader. So we sort of lead up to, you know, she's like, wait a second, I have to have this moment where so America doesn't make a ton of sense to me as an opener to the album proper, but it makes a lot of sense to me in retrospect as a closer. And
I really like that. That's really an interesting.
Like,
it's a surprising end, but I think it makes sense, especially after the like 1-2 punch of the title track. It's kind of
right.
You get that lusciousness back in with all of the instrumentation, and you know,
well, and there's so much confidence of like, oh, we've come out the other side. I've freed myself from your religion. I've unshackled myself from your patriarchal bullshit, and just for, you know, the next year, who enters the race? Donald Trump, who then sets our country and our world on a collision course backwards into some of its very worst features, particularly when they have to do with women and anybody who is queer and, you know, non-cis heteronormative,
sensitive, artistic souls.
Yeah, and she knew that was coming. And she wanted that on the record as documentation, as witness. It wasn't what the whole record was about, but she wanted to put it there. And so I find it a sort of haunting ending after everything that precedes it. Now, the hardest cut that I made, which, you know, was Selkie. I love Selkie. I love it so much. And I couldn't find a place for it. It's not on here because
talking about where's your wife? Mark says, where's your wife? She's Selkie. The end. That's where she goes.
Selkie, I tried, and I wanted to keep the alternating between the solo and something with accompaniment.
Yeah.
I love Selkie. So what I did was, for me, by putting Forest of Glass on there, it feels like Selkie then becomes the beloved B-side for me instead.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I ditched Invisible Boy because I feel like Forest of Glass and Weatherman do that work really, really well. And I like Invisible Boy, but it feels too long. There's something like it's a mouthful, has too many lyrics. I'm not quite sure what she wants to say about Mark in that song, and I don't know, it feels redundant, and so I try to remove the redundancy. I still think it's a lovely song, but it didn't really fit for me, and I didn't really need it. Of course, I got rid of Maids of Elfinmere, as I've told you, and I got rid of Giant's Rolling Pin because I only wanted one song that pointed directly at like sort of the state of the world and something political, and I thought America was the way to do that. But I kind of like Giant's Rolling Pin. I think it's like silly and fun and kind of
It's
actually
hilarious.
kind of amounts to something, and I kind of love that she just like ate some delicious pies by these nice women in Florida, and she's like, I'm gonna put you
I
in a
want to
song.
try the pies. Yeah,
Me
I
too.
want to try the
Yeah.
pies.
I've always wanted to try those pies. But Joey, I think one note that I'm going to write down, and someone else should also write it down. I
Yeah.
think a silly song episode is in order. I think that'd be a lot of fun
for sure. Yes,
for
oh, yeah.
season 2.
Putting it
Because there is a place for these songs, not necessarily on our reimagining of the album itself, but I think there's definitely places for all of these songs lurking somewhere. I wanted
And
to
it'll be-
ask.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, it'll be interesting to think of the silly songs when we get to our final episode of season 1, Boys for Pele, which has both the silly song title for B-sides, but within the album has all of these short songs that we could designate as silly songs, and I'll be curious to see what happens when we mess with that epic masterpiece, and what do we do with, I'll be curious to know what happens to those little intro or interstitial songs, and
not to give away the baby
how do
with
we
the
value
bathwater. but nothing on Boys
Nothing.
for Pele is silly to me. But
Same. Nothing gets cut. The
No,
end.
but not even. But the silly songs on the singles aren't even silly. Like everything about
No.
Boys for Pele is coated in like just grim soil. Like it is
Yes.
it is a
grime
yeah.
and grease. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
wait to talk about it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we're running along. So favorite moments. Everybody have
Turning and oysters.
that final turn. When she goes up higher.
Similar to what I said in the other episode, I don't even remember what song it was, where it's like a perfect like a fouette in ballet where you land it. It's like where you're turning and then like you pull your leg out of the turn to land it. That's what that last turn and then the piano sounds like to
Yeah.
me. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
love that ending of oysters again, a perfect landing. What about you guys?
I was gonna be a smartass and say the kazoo.
Right. We do like
Obviously, I think it's super fun. I have a hard time singling in on one moment on this record.
Yeah, me too.
I want to say, certain lyrics. I don't know that there's a specific moment, but there is something that I really, really love and that I always respond to, and that is in Weatherman, the way she's, telling the story by using color in the lyrics, and to me that really evokes the image, obviously, of painting. It really, to me, brings the whole, if there is a theme of the record, it really brings it together by using that language, and I really like that she chose to do that. I think it's really evocative and really conjures a mood, describing the colors of certain things. The pink tourmaline is for me right up there. So I think the way she uses language on Weatherman to me is probably the moment. I don't know if that counts as one moment,
Yeah.
but
No,
it's
Yeah.
just
of course
something
it does.
I've always really loved.
I agree with everything everybody said, and that's the surprise of this, that this is actually a record where it's hard to choose just one moment, because there's actually so much beauty and so much. I don't know. I mean, I think this is one of the. We've sort of entered a few years prior to this sort of the more polarized fan reaction to her music, and I think that a lot of people can be dismissive or confused by Geraldines, and after doing this work, it just reinforces for me that I just can't relate to that. I just don't know what they're talking about. I just think that there's so much good stuff on this album. Yeah. Maddie.
I was going to just add one quick thing, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but I don't think you're going to go there. I think if we're looking at more of a macro look at this record if we're thinking of a favorite moment. I mean,
Yeah.
we can celebrate for a minute that Tori Amos, who very publicly had struggles with conceiving a child and having miscarriages and wrote very much about that and talked so much about it, has a duet with her daughter, whom she adores, does a video. Like, that's a very special moment in Tori's history. And I think, right now we're going through such a discussion about Nepo babies in the media. And, we'll talk probably a little bit more about that when we talk about Night of the Hunters, where she started having Tash perform with her, or sing with her, rather, not perform, excuse me. But the fact that Tori can even have that moment, whether you like the song or whether you hate the song or whatever you think about the song, doesn't really matter. I think when you're following the whole arc of Tori's life and her career, especially at 50, to be having this just really pure and wonderful moment with her daughter, who, they've got great, Tori's obsessed with her daughter, they've got a really lovely relationship, and I think it's really great that she was able to have that moment in general. So
I love that you brought that up, because I think like one of my kind of like disconnects with the album is around like when this album came up, that's when I started being like, am I going to have kids? Am I not going to have kids? And then like I had like the first time I got pregnant, it was a miscarriage. And then I also had friends who struggle with infertility. So it was like not what I thought it was going to be. Okay. And so now that obviously like that part of my life is behind me. So like I didn't appreciate that as somebody who hadn't lived through any of that before. And of course my daughter is solidly in ribbons undone age. But at each year as my relationships with my children develop, I more and more understand how it is. And then you get Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, which is Unrepentant Geraldines.
Joey, what's your moment? Did I steal your thunder?
Yeah, I'll just end. There's so much to say, but I'll just say that I love the lyrics to Wild Way. I really do. And I love the simple moment of, I hate you, I do. I hate that I turn into some kind of monster with just the flick of your finger. I love the idea of turning into a monster. Like, it's so simple, especially for Tori Amos, but the way she delivers it, and it's so real. Like, I hate that I turn into a monster. And
does
the ambiguity.
She doesn't.
No,
is it a sexy flick, or is it a...
But it's that, and that's the thing. It's like these flicks of the finger.
Is it this, or is it this?
But I think it's both. I think it's both, right? You turn me into a monster, or you can, you make me feel gorgeous with the flick of your finger, or you make me turn into a monster with the flick of your finger. And that is, that's marriage, folks.
That's right.
I want to just point out one really quick thing before we wrap up. I know we are running super long. We always do this. It's okay. It's
a great combo, though.
This is a really good conversation on this album.
It's a revelatory conversation on the record, I think.
I just want to say none of us included this song, but while we're waiting for the White Telephone to God EP to drop, I'm wondering what's going to be on it. But I have a funny anecdote about White Telephone to God, and that is that is, once upon a time in Los Angeles, I was riding in the back of an SUV with Tori Amos, and she said something to me, and I responded to her with a direct quote from a lyric from White Telephone to God. She looked at me and laughed, and I do not think she knew that she had written that lyric at all. And I said, that's your lyric, right? And she just kind of did one of those.
She did the blink.
Yeah, I got a good double blink.
Blink, blink.
I love the double blink.
Mm-hmm. She had to think about it for a minute. And then we got some pizza, which was,
I was going to say, was
of
this
course,
like
yeah,
pizza?
It was pizza related.
10 a.m.
Got it.
It was pizza related. We don't need to discuss the time, but we had some pizza, and it was delicious.
It was morning.
Well, that's a great...
a lot of good eating.
Okay, we'll have an episode about all the things you ate with Tori Amos. Okay, that'll be a bonus episode.
Patreon,
if you want to throw in $5 to hear about all these meals. Anyway, thank you, everybody. This has been wonderful. Please pop Geraldines on your vinyl soon, I guess.
Pop
But please follow us wherever you download podcasts. Rate, review, subscribe, give us 5 stars. Follow us on YouTube. We know y'all like to watch us on YouTube. You like to look at us. So
sick fuckers.
Keep it up.
You fucking
Sick little
weirdos.
fox, yeah. But yeah, it's been great. All right, love you guys.
Love
Nighty
you.
night. Bye bye.
Said I'm walking my way back. I'm still walking my way back. And to me again. Not every girl is a pearl. With these ruby slippers, with these ruby slippers, so then I'm gonna turn oysters on the sand. Not every girl is popular, popular. Well, fuck them. It's a girl with these ruby slippers, with these ruby slippers, with these ruby slippers. I said, with these ruby slippers. So then we're gonna turn oysters on the side. So then we're gonna turn oysters on the sand. Turn with me, we can turn it out. We can turn. We can turn oysters in the